Welcome back to the Form.IO Getting Started series. In the last milestone, we built and embedded your first form and configured authentication for it. You learn how to configure components, set up roles and permissions, and capture submissions securely within your application. Now that you're collecting submission data, it's time to take the next step and put the data to use. In this milestone, we'll explore how Form.IO's actions and integrations allow your form submission data to connect and interact with the rest of your tech stack. In this video, we'll cover what are actions and integrations, setting up integrations within your project, configuring Form.IO actions, and testing integrations and actions. In Form.IO, actions define what happens after a submission is made. Think of them as triggers that extend the functionality of your form. When a user submits data, an action can send an email confirmation or post data to an external API or webhook. Meanwhile, integrations connect your project to external services, such as email providers, file storage systems, or security tools like reCAPTCHA to be used across forms within a project. These integrations make actions possible and extend the overall capabilities of your forms. In short, forms collect the data, actions decide what happens next, and integrations connect it all together. Each service provider has its own configuration steps, so make sure to review both the Form.IO documentation and the provider's documentation when setting up these integrations. For our first integration, we'll set up an email server, which is required to fire off an email action after a form is submitted. You'll need to have your own external email service set up prior in order to get this integration working properly. For this example, we'll be using an SMTP email server. To integrate our email service, we'll click the Settings tab within our project, click Integrations, and select Email Provider. Select the correct email service tab, and enter in the required credentials. Once configured, the email provider will be available as a selectable option within your email action and can be used to automate emails when a form is submitted. Next, let's set up a Google Drive integration to maintain a live Google Sheet record of all expense report submissions. Similar to the email server, you'll need to have your own Google APIs already configured in order to get this integration working properly. To set up our Google Drive, we'll head back to the Integration Settings tab and click Data Connections. Under the Google Drive tab, input the required client ID, client secret, and refresh token. Once complete, the action will be able to push form data directly to Google Sheets when the expense report form is submitted. Finally, let's configure a file storage provider to support file uploads within our expense report form, so our end users can upload their receipts before making their submission. Ensure you have your own file storage provider set up before configuring the integration. I'll be using an AWS S3 bucket for my file storage. To integrate your storage provider, return to the Integration tab and click File Storage. Choose your provider and enter the required details such as access keys, folders, or bucket names. Once configured, the file component can be added to your forms to upload files directly to your integrated storage provider. Now that we set up a few integrations, let's update our expense report form by adding a file component, linking it to our storage integration, along with a special field that will support the webhook action we'll use later in the video. Open the expense report form within your project and drag a file component onto the form builder. Within the component settings, select your configured storage provider. If necessary, specify any directories or folder paths specific to your provider. Next, add a select component called approval with the values approved and denied. Check the hidden flag within the component settings. This field will come into play later in the video. Now let's connect our form to the integrations we set up using actions. To view or add actions, open up your form and select the Actions tab. Click the drop-down to see the available action types. Each action runs in response to a before-after handler and can be triggered by events like submission creation or updates. Before adding an action, it's always best practice to enable action logs, which provide a detailed record of every action triggered by a form submission. They help you verify successful executions, identify errors, and troubleshoot integrations like webhooks, emails, and data connections. Let's start with a simple example, sending a confirmation email after an expense report is submitted. Navigate back to the Action tab within your expense report form, click the Action dropdown, and add the email action. Each action has its own configuration settings. The email action settings allow you to specify who the email should be sent to and customize the subject and message body of the email. Give the action a name and select the email provider you configured earlier. Now let's configure who this email should be sent to. Use the data variable data.email to send a confirmation email to the user who submitted the form. Within this variable, the email is the API property name of the email field on our form. You can also tailor the message using data from the submission. We'll be using the dynamic data variable again to populate the user name and expense details within our message. Next, we can set up a condition so this email only fires off when the user checks the checkbox signifying they want a copy of the expense report. We'll leave the handler and method settings to default and save our action. Next, let's set up another action to automatically log all expense submissions into a Google Sheet. I already have a Google Sheet created, which will be used within the Google Sheet action. Go back to the Action tab, click the Action dropdown, and add the Google Sheet action. We'll give the action a name and find our sheet ID within the URL of our Google Sheet and apply the worksheet name within the Google Sheet action. Now we can map the fields from our form, such as the expense type, date, amount, employee name, to the appropriate columns within our Google Sheet. Now every new submission will instantly populate in your sheet, keeping a live record of all expenses for the month. It is important to note that the sheet includes formulas designed to filter submissions by the current month and calculate a running total for each user's expense. Now let's connect Form.IO to an external system using a webhook action. Webhooks are one of the most powerful ways to integrate Form.IO with your existing stack. The endpoint I'll be using with my webhook connects to an application that queries the Google Sheet and determines whether expense falls within the user's allowed budget. If the new total remains under an arbitrary $1,000 limit that we've specified, the application sets the submission's hidden approval field to approved. If the total exceeds $1,000, the application sets the hidden approval field to denied. To set up our webhook, click the Actions tab and add the webhook action. Give the action a name and set the request method to post. Paste the destination endpoint URL and save the action. With our actions and integrations configured, the final step is to test them to ensure data flows correctly between Form.IO and your connected systems. Because our integrations are tied to form components and actions, We can test them by simply submitting the expense report form. Let's log into our application and open up the form. Make sure to fully complete and submit the expense report form, as the field data within the submission will trigger the email action and determine the recipient address, populate rows in our Google Sheet action, and activate the webhook to check whether the total in the Google Sheet is within the user's allowed amount. Make sure and upload a file as well to ensure our file integration is working properly. After submitting the form, let's verify that everything is working behind the scenes. We'll head over to our file storage provider, in this example AWS S3, and check for the uploaded receipt. Seeing the file in our bucket confirms that the file storage integration is working correctly. Next, let's check our email service to verify if our email provider integration is also working properly. Looking into the email message, we can see data dynamically populate within the message body. We can also check our action logs to verify if actions were executed. Action logs are particularly useful when troubleshooting failing actions. Next, let's head over to our Google Sheet to ensure that our Google Drive integration is also working. Opening our sheet, I can see that a new row has been added corresponding to the submission I just made. Data fields such as the date, expense type, amount, and employee name populate in the correct columns. I'll also validate that any formulas or filters in the sheet are calculating after the new entry. Finally, let's look at our webhook action. Although this action does not correlate to a specific integration, it does send a request to a validation endpoint that queries the Google Sheet and determines whether the expense falls within the user's allowed budget. If the expense total is under the $1,000 limit, the application sets the hidden approval field to approved and denied if the total is above the $1,000 limit. As we saw in our Google Sheet, our limit is right under $1,000. We can see in our action logs that the webhook action was successful in making the outbound request to our external validation endpoint. In turn, the application set the approval status to approved. We can test this again by making an additional submission within our application, which will put our user's allotted total over the $1,000 limit. Looking at our second submission, we can see that the approval field is set to denied. When all of our integrations and actions perform as expected, our expense report workflow is fully operational and ready for live use. You've now taken your Form.IO project beyond basic form building, connecting it to real-world systems and workflows, complete with email notifications, file storage, and external API connections, all managed using Form.IO. We've covered a lot of ground in this video, and with that, we've reached the end of the Form.IO Getting Started video series. During the course of these videos, you deployed the Form.IO platform, logged into the developer portal, and configured secure access for your team. You built your first form and embedded it into your application with proper authentication. And with this most recent video, enhanced it with key integrations and actions to ensure it fits seamlessly into your existing tech stack. Together, these milestones give you the foundation to build scalable, secure, and fully connected form-driven applications with Form.IO. If you found this video series helpful, consider subscribing to the channel and sharing with your team. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more content from Form.IO.